to share one of the tricks that I use for doing more complicated repeats, and especially when elements have to sort of interact with each other in a really pleasing way, and I don't have it totally figured out before building this sort of initial composition. And that is smart objects. So just one little fail-safe, I like to add registration marks because I want my smart object to, fill this entire 15-inch square block, just because it makes it a little bit easier to work with. Okay, so I added some registration marks. I'm going to go ahead to Layer, then down to Smart Objects, Convert to Smart Object. And what that does is just create this sort of editable, sort of like linked file here. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. So each time you duplicate the smart object, it's always linked to that same editable file. So any changes I make to that file will appear in all of these smart objects that are in the block here. Okay, and I'm going to be mindful of these sort of overlaps. So we've got it overlapping there, behind, which is nice. Okay. But yeah, I've got a few things that I'm not crazy about, like in this negative space. And so I'm just going to go ahead and I can click on any of these and just double click the little icon there, and now it opens that layered file that has all of these, all of my elements in there. I'm going to label this. Right, and then you just Command S to save. The one thing about working with smart objects is you have to remember to save twice, because you have to save when you're within the smart object and then again when you're in your file. Okay, so that moved that one sort of death apple element, and now I'm not crazy about the way it's overlapping. So I'm going to move that again. So this is another step that you can just get kind of lost in for hours and hours and hours. Let's take a look. Yeah, so we're gonna bit of a different direction than we were in before. I can take a look at this with my central smart object reversed, Command T, or maybe even upside down. There's some nice movement in there. It's got a bit of a zigzag or like a chevron pattern appearing. Okay, but maybe you hate that there are these gaps. So what you can do is you could conceivably Maybe let's just enlarge this central part. So now it bleeds off of the edges. And I'm just going to show you what this does to the repeat, even though you can probably guess. So it creates a mistake in the repeat, a sort of cut off part, because that element, you know, goes off the edges, but it doesn't repeat on the other end where it's going to line up. So in order to fix that, I'm going to select, and I'm going to go ahead and do this at sort of a more easy to deal with point, because I could, so it's at a negative 0.747 inches. I'm just going to go ahead and change that to -1, and here's a time where I'm just going to use just a new guide. -1. I'm going to go ahead and move this until it snaps to that. And then, in order to make sure that this seamlessly repeats not only side to side but also this top to bottom, I'm going to go ahead and add another guide here. So we were 15 inches, and since we scooted that central element up 1 inch, I'm going to add a new guide at 14 inches, which is 1 inch from the bottom. And then I'm going to duplicate this and line it up with that new end mark. So now you can see this element that was going off of the edge appears at the other edge. And now it's going to repeat properly. There we go. And maybe you want now these edge pieces to also have something sort of fill in there. And you could do the same thing where you start getting into guidelines going all over the place, or we could even just be very basic about it and go back into these elements. I'm just going to go ahead and use this one here. And the easiest thing to do is just holding Shift, snap it at the halfway point, duplicate it, drag it, still holding Shift, again at the halfway point. And then if you hold these two copies that are both currently lined up so that there's a proper seamless transition there, and if you select them both and then Command T again, any sort of movement that you do to replace them, they'll remain lined up. I'm just scooting them around. And I want to have one more thing over there. Okay, it's a little busy. You would probably want to play around with how objects overlap and maybe not have this much overlapping unless that's what you're into. There's other little places where maybe there's too much going on versus maybe not enough. But again, you could spend days finessing something like this, and so it depends on how much energy you want to put into it.